Whether it's managing everyday stress or turning loss or disappointment into a catalyst for your future, we all need to live a life that's big, bold, brave. That is the mantra and the title of a new book by my guest today. Hello, and welcome to Living Well with Robin Stoloff, empowering you to live a healthier life. I am so pleased to welcome Clint Hatton. He is a father, husband, personal development coach, and he is here to talk about overcoming an unthinkable tragedy. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate that. Please share your story with us, Clint.
Hi, Robin. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. It's a joy to be able to talk to you today. Yeah, our story is the one that, no parent wishes on anyone. You hope that it's something that you never have to endure, but it's part of our story now. So it's, a journey that we find ourselves on. I'm a father of three boys. My oldest son, Gabriel, was, we all think all of our kids are extraordinary, right? So they're all extraordinary in their own way, but he was very motivated and very goal oriented at a young age. And about 8 years old, he decided he wanted to become a pilot. He'd flew in a little plane with his uncle Danny and got the bug and was, just super excited about being a pilot someday. And so he didn't let go of that. He didn't let it, go like a lot of kids do and decide they want to be in the NFL the following week, right? It was always a pilot. So at the age of 16, he got the opportunity to actually start to be trained by a club that he was in called Tango 31 Aero Club. And eventually at 16 years old, before he even got his driver's license, he actually soloed, which was an experience in and of itself, kind of crazy. So he was well on his way. And at the age of 17, which is the youngest you can be to earn a private pilot's license, he passed the very first time the written exam, went up for his check ride, passed with flying colors, and boom, he became a pilot. And so he was living his dream. And then for us, the end of September, it was September 23rd, 2019, just a few months shy of his 18th birthday. He was on a trip, just getting hours, which is what it's all about when you're a young pilot. You're just trying to fly as much as you can. And he took a friend home to the University of Arkansas, which is just a little north of us here in Dallas. And on the return trip, he got about 20 minutes away from the airport there. And he ran into some unexpected weather, which eventually caused him to suffer from spatial disorientation. Some of your listeners are probably familiar with that. The Kobe Bryant crash, of course, was very well known because of his notoriety. And it's the same thing that his pilot suffered from. And so he thought he was flying up. He wasn't. And he crashed and lost his life.
My
So,
God.
so Robin, as anyone can imagine, and unfortunately there's listeners out there that have suffered something like this as well personally, but it's a devastating blow. And so, we found ourselves on the couch that morning with my two other sons, who at that time were 9 and 13, and my beautiful bride. We had been married 17 years at that point. And, we had a decision to make in the middle of just severe pain and grief, and that was, how are we going to begin to walk this out? Now, I want to tell this part, Robin. I feel like I had an advantage to a degree, not with the pain. Nothing can ever prepare you for the pain that you feel when you lose anyone that's super close to you, let alone a child. But I had been helping, coaching, and mentoring people. I'd been a pastor for 17 years. So I've helped a lot of people in really bad situations, including death of a loved one. So even though that does nothing to help you with the pain, I did have an idea of the kinds of things that we could go through. And I certainly had an idea of, if we didn't kind of set a compass, that we could really struggle. And unfortunately, a lot of marriages implode after something like this,
Sure. Yeah.
as do
It's
even
just
families. Yeah,
devastating. Yeah.
it's just really difficult. And so that morning, and this is where I began the journey of what we're going to call Big Bold Brave here in just a little bit. I just turned to my family and I said, listen, we have two choices. We can choose life or we can choose death. And what I simply meant by that, Robin, is Gabriel attacked life. He went for it like all the time. It's just how he lived. You can see some guitars behind me. He taught himself how to play guitar. There's a photo actually on the wall that you can see that he was an amazing photographer. everything that he decided was an adventure, he was going to go for. And he didn't let anything, he didn't let fear, he didn't let risk, he didn't let anything get in his way of living life the way he wanted to live it. And so I told him, that's what we're going to do. We're not going to do the same things he did, because we each have our own, desires and
Yes, of
gifts and
course.
passions. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to choose to honor the way he lived by living ours the way he lived. And I feel like that was critical, Robin, because
Yeah.
what I call a death mentality is just simply, it sounds awful, I know, but what it simply is you're going to feel the pain. We still feel the pain. We're going to feel the pain and the void of his loss for the rest of our lives. That you can't change that. There's no going back, and there is no such thing as moving on from losing a human being. But you can move forward. And a death mentality keeps you stuck in your pain. It keeps you in a place in your pain where it steals from your future. And we just didn't want that for our lives. And so it's
And your two
been
other kids, I mean, and their
right.
lives as well. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what launched us out as a family just during our early time of grief. And, again, just gave us kind of a compass on where we wanted to go. Now, eventually, because your listeners are probably wondering, well, you wrote a book, and, the phrase "big bold brave." What happened is it became news partly because it was just the story of a local pilot dying, but his age kind of amplified that. And so the next morning, NBC, amongst a couple of others, reached out, wanted to do a story on it, and of course, we were a complete train wreck. So I just said, "There's no way, we can't do an interview." But at the end of the call, the reporter, who was very kind, just said to me, she said, "Listen," she goes, "I just want you to think about it, because here's what's going to happen. A story is going to go out tonight. If I don't get an opportunity to talk to you about it, then it's going to be a report on his death. If you'll let me, I'll let you tell the story your way, and you can talk about his life." And so very quickly we were put to the test of this idea of living, a life or a death mentality. And so that afternoon we had a TV crew in our
Oh my
living room.
gosh. I
And
don't know how you could have done that. Yeah.
I don't remember much about the interview.
Yeah. I bet.
As far as just, what it was like to go through it. It was very difficult. Obviously, we had to stop a few different times. We, couldn't do anything in one take, because we were a lot of tears, a lot of pain. But what ended up happening was, somewhere in that interview, I said that he lived his life big, bold, and brave. I don't remember saying it, Robin, but what happened was, she created what ended up being a really beautiful segment. It was 2-3 minutes that they aired that night. And it told his story. And there was a lot of beautiful imagery of just how he lived. And at the end, she chose, instead of to play my part of when I said it, she ended the broadcast with, "And Gabriel's parents encourage you to live your life big, bold, and brave."
Wow.
And it still kind
That
of gets
is
me.
incredible. Yeah,
it,
absolutely. Oh my goodness.
it still gets me.
And
Yeah.
and how long ago was this, Clint?
So that was the morning of September 24th, 2019. So just a little over 3 years ago. I guess we're going on 3.5 now.
And how are your sons? How is your wife?
Yeah. Well, again, as you can imagine, none of this has been easy. It's been incredibly challenging. And even though, we've made some decisions, one of the other decisions we made that morning was just the way we were going to grieve. I told them, "Listen, none of us knows what it's going to look like from day to day, or for that matter, early on, from hour to hour. And each one of us is going to feel differently at different times. One of us may feel sad and want to cry. Another one may feel angry and want to scream. The other one may feel something completely different." And so we just set some ground rules as a family that whatever they were, it was okay. And that, I've cried many times as a father. And so, my wife doesn't try to stop me, or if she was the one who was, crying, or if one of the boys was, we didn't try to stop each other and say things like very well-meaning people tend to want to do, which is, "Oh, don't cry, don't cry. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." It's just not healthy. We allowed each other through these last few years to process out loud in front of one another and talk it through. And so I think that has been a huge, huge aid in getting us to where we're at this point. But it's been really hard. My middle son Robin, his name is Joel. He's 18 now. He just turned 18
Mm-hmm.
not too long ago. They had just become really best friends. They'd kind of turned that corner from
Uh-huh.
being the brothers that are like constantly beating
Yeah.
the fire out of
All
each
of a
other.
sudden, when you grow
Yeah,
up a little, you start to appreciate each other a little more. Yeah.
totally, totally.
Yeah.
And so, they literally a few months before the crash had turned that corner. And so, for him, it's been a different experience than my youngest, who they had 8 years in between
Yeah.
them. And so Liam, his way, which was interesting, and I'm going to share this with your listeners because if any of you are out there going through this or have gone through this, it needs to be okay that everybody is unique. And so Liam would just bring him into very everyday, mundane things. Like we'd be out eating at a pizza joint. Oh, Gabriel would have loved this pizza, or
Mm-hmm.
we're watching a movie.. Gabriel would have loved this movie, and that was his way of keeping him in his memory and kind of carrying him along,
Mm-hmm.
on his own little journey. So it's been hard. There's been some really rough spots. We haven't done any of this perfectly. We're not perfect humans. But those two things, just keeping a life mentality and allowing everybody to process and be okay with some days are going to be better than others, I think has gone a long way. And both boys are doing really, really well now.
Oh, that's so
One,
good.
yes, Joel graduated early from high school. He's getting ready for college now, and he's on his way. My little Liam is a black belt now. He has black belt at 12 years old, and so he's the martial artist. And
Well, you're
then
doing something right. You're raising good kids. That is
yeah,
great. And I do like the fact that you remember your son and, even bringing him up in everyday conversations. Gabe would like this, Gabriel. I think
yeah,
that's so good. I lost my mom. My husband lost both his parents. They were much older,
mm,
of course, but
yeah,
we always talk about them. And
yeah,
it doesn't make me sad. It makes me happy because I'm remembering, we're remembering them and
yeah,
you're almost, they're almost like so close to you that way. And I think that's a good thing to do. I mean, everyone grieves in their own way, but we do that in our family all the time. I mention my mom a lot. My
yeah,
husband mentions his parents, and it's just something that, for us, that works for us. It helps us to keep their memory alive. They're still with us in our
absolutely.
hearts. So that's
Oh, I
good.
think
So
that's so good. Yeah.
yeah, it's so true. And so talk to me a little about what you do, how you help other people. I'm sure you can relate to people who have had tragedies in their lives, whether it's been, a loss of someone they love, a divorce. There's so many different avenues
Sure.
for people
Sure.
that can experience, something tragic in their lives, and how you work with them, and a little more about your book and what the book has to say about this.
Yeah. Well, I think you just brought up something that's really critical, in this particular case, if you're talking about a really, tragic loss, there is definitely something that you have in you that someone who hasn't had that experience doesn't have. That, if you're willing to help other people, there's a certain credibility, if you want to call it that, relatability, whatever it is. But, you know, um, this loss is definitely, I like to say I was compassionate before, and now it's thrown like rocket fuel on compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to point out real quick too, because we're not going to get into my full story because I'm old. No, I'm not old, but I got a lot of stories. But in my past, I used meth for 9 years in my 20s. I also was I had a failed marriage and a divorce, so I've been through that. We suffered through a miscarriage. Out of our three boys, as they were being born, she almost lost her life twice in childbirth. Liam was born at 1 pound 14 ounces. So there's a lot of things in our journey that I can relate to people, and so I think that definitely helps. But at the end of the day, here's why I wrote the book, and then I'll answer your question in terms of how I help people. The reason why I wrote the book had a lot to do with timing. Otherwise, I probably would have waited longer, to be honest with you. But 3 months after we lost Gabriel, COVID hit the world. And so our first 2 years plus of grieving also involved processing the complexity of life, as everybody's world got turned upside down.
Yeah.
And there's been tremendous loss both in life, and then people lost careers and businesses, and in many marriages, under the strain and stress of you know, in some cases just being together all the time, but, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
just
Nowhere to run.
right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. But, you know, there's been many other forms of loss. That's why I'm glad you brought that up, because, you know, my pain is my pain, and we still feel the pain because of the love we shared, right? I'm not looking for the pain to go away, but we do have to find ways to take these hits in life, these punches in the gut, and then turn around and use that pain as a catalyst, you know, to move forward. And so that's something that I do. The book, I think, is going to be very helpful. I've had some amazing testimonies already from those who have read it that have really helped them, whether they suffered a really deep loss. It's helped them kind of look at healing and look at the rest of their life a little bit differently. So that's been one thing that's done. I've had some others that, you know, haven't suffered the loss of a child, but maybe they were just stuck or they were afraid. I talk a lot about fear and risk and those types of things in the book as well, because if we're going to do something significant in life, if we're going to live a life that we truly are fulfilled, it requires overcoming fear. It requires taking some risks, right? And so, you know, I wrote the book largely because the world has just been devastated with that. And there are so many people that had lost hope and don't feel like, you know, there's much to look forward to, and that our world
Hmm.
is falling apart. And, you
That's
know,
true.
there are things, you know, that aren't good, but I don't think that way. I believe there's a lot of amazing human beings out there. My tagline is courageous humans, inspiring lives. I believe, just like you, it's the reason why I want to be on your show. There's so many people out there that do see hope, that do
Yes.
want to help others, that do believe that it's still worthwhile to chase my dreams and I can achieve them. And so, you know, that's another reason why I wrote the book as well.
It seems so far away, though, for so many people. I mean, it just
Mm,
seems like something out there that you're kind of reaching for. But what is the first step? How do you
yeah,
even begin a process of healing and of reaching for something, a little bit higher than yourself?
right. Yeah, well, I think for me, you know, when you start talking about even the book itself or my speaking engagements with it, if it's a corporate environment or, you know, whatever, obviously I approach it a little bit different depending on that audience. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to dig into your own story. And so, like, if I'm meeting one on one with somebody, that's one of the first things I want to know. I ask them to tell them or tell me their story, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to what are your goals. You know, what are the metrics that we're trying to hit? Are you just trying to make more money? Do you want to, you know, have a better relationship? Rather than going directly to that, I like to hear their story. And the
Mm.
reason why that's so critical, Robin, is because when you hear someone tell their own story, there are words that are going to stand out. Even their body language is going to change based on what part of their story they're telling. And so a lot of times what I've discovered is we can find out through the way they see their own story, that in and of itself, one of the reasons why they can't get to where they want to go, because they're
Mm-hmm.
telling themselves one narrative about who they are and what they believe and what they're capable of. And then they have this nebulous thing out there, but this is how I want to live. And you can't have that kind of a mindset and then achieve a lifestyle that's completely different. So it always
Yes.
starts with how you see yourself first. So that's where I like to start.
I like that a lot. And especially because it's very interesting to ask somebody to describe themselves. How does someone
Yeah.
describe themselves? What do they emphasize? Is it their background? Is it their childhood? Is it their current situation? Do they say they're a mom before they're a businesswoman, or a businesswoman before they're a mom? It's funny, but
Yeah.
that's actually a good point, because when you describe yourself, it kind of shows what's most important to you, because they're the words, they're the things you're going to say probably up front. This is who I am and this is what I'm about. So that's a really interesting way to look at it. So, how
Yeah.
do you make that leap if you want to get somebody to another place, whether it's overcoming a tragedy, a loss,
Mm.
difficulties, a job, a spouse, whatever it is? Where do you go? What do you do? Do you write down, some of your thoughts and ideas, or do you just talk it out? What do you do?
Yeah. Well, I love what you just said, because to me, that's the launching pad. Because when you ask that question, obviously there's a lot of different personalities. So one may say, well, let's say she's a woman. She may say, I'm the CEO of X corporation. and I'm a wife and I'm a mother. And you got another one who, oh, I'm a mom. That part's different, right? But you're
Uh-huh.
going to hear in the way they describe their story, most of the time, Robin, people tell you what they do,
Yes.
not who they are.
Yes. Isn't that
And
funny? Well,
that's
that's how
a critical distinction. Yeah.
just that's how we live. That's how we show up in the world. What do you do?
Right.
When you're at a party, what do you do? Not who are you? You
That's
know what I
exactly
mean?
right.
It's the
That's
first
right.
question that people ask you. What do you do? You have to justify your existence by whatever job it is that you have. And the worst part to me is always like, I always feel bad. Like stay-at-home mom to me is one of the toughest, it is the toughest job in the world.
Oh,
And
without
women sort of
question.
have to
Yeah.
justify themselves when they stay at home. I'm a stay-at-home mom. You ought to
Right.
like shout that from the rooftop. I am a stay-at-home mom. And that is not
That's
an easy
exactly
job.
right.
But it's just, it's the way our society views things. And we got to stop. We got to stop making the judgments on people. That's a whole nother, we can talk about that another time. But so
Easily. Yeah.
so where do you go? What's the first step that you
So,
go? Where do you go with people?
yeah. So that's why I like to just start with, tell me your story, because they usually give me the what I do. So then we
Uh-huh.
shift into, okay, but tell me who are you? And here's why that's so important. Robin, I bet you if you went out there right now and even Googled it, the number one question that gets asked to whether it's a personal development coach, life coach, whether it's a pastor or anybody that people go to for counsel, right?
Mm-hmm.
The number one thing far and away is always trying to find their purpose.
Yes.
People always want to know their purpose, or who am I? You could use the word identity as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's only when you realize, or when you can help them realize that, okay, I asked you to tell me your story and all you did was describe what you do, not who you are. So let's back up. Let's start talking about who you are. And what happens is then you're going to begin to discover that the way they operate in certain elements of their life, whether it's in their business, they may operate one way. In their marriage, they may operate a completely different way. In their friendships, and that's why you see so many people that they may have a measure of success in one of those areas, but in other areas of their life, it's a complete train wreck.
Mm-hmm.
And they really want to have wholeness of life, right? They really want to have a fulfilling life, but they've only learned how to be the part of them that's successful in the one area.
Yes, that happens a
And so
lot.
they
It
stick with
happens
that.
with business people a lot. They're very
Absolutely.
successful and then their marriage falls apart or they don't see their kids a lot. That happens often.
Right. So, let's say I'm talking to a businessman who's a father, and he works 80 hours a week or 100 hours a week, and he's super successful, and they live in a beautiful home and they've got all the stuff, right? But then if I'm asking him, who do you want to be? Well, I really want to be a better dad. Well, that's great. That sounds wonderful. But what does that look like? Why do you want to be a better dad? What
Mm-hmm.
what does that look like? Who do you think you would be? Describe it to me. And so when that happens, the beauty of this is they begin to realize as they're talking to themselves that they realize there are certain character traits or things that they've dismissed to be able to do what they want to do. And let's say it's with the kids, I want to be able to spend more time with them. Okay, great. Well, why do you want to spend more time with them? Because I want to experience more joy. I want to have fun with my kids. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Because now we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about who do you really want to be? Then we can start getting to, and this is obviously very fast track, but with this conversation, but then we can start getting to, okay, now let's take a look at what you actually do in your life. Let's look at your calendar, because your calendar is going to say a lot about what you have in life, the way you spend your time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then we can start breaking things down. So for me, to put that into kind of a quick 1, 2, 3, it starts with hearing the story. Then it starts with talking about who do they really want to be. Then we can start looking at specific changes or action items that they can implement to begin to steer in that direction.
I love all that. That is just fantastic because sometimes people, like I'm a person that, looks at goals and looks at, this is what I want
Mhm.
to achieve. And sometimes it's hard to go from A to B without an action plan. But as you said, why? You have to know why. What's your reasoning behind it? And that's very important as well. And do you
Yeah.
ever have anybody that wants to do it but just really can't, or they deep down don't want to? Does that ever happen?
Yeah, no, it does. I hesitate to say they don't really want it, because I think now you're trying to judge someone else's
Right,
motives, and
right.
that's
They
always kind of a
probably
dangerous
do.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think more often than not, this has been my experience. They don't have either the discipline to make the changes that need to be made, or often I have found that there are pains and hurts of the past that have become a part of that story they tell themselves about who they are, and they're just unwilling to go there.
Yeah.
Like they want to bury it. And what they don't recognize is that old self is absolutely dictating to their current self where their life direction is going to go. To me, those are the two that I've found far and away are very common.
Do you ever have someone that all of a sudden experiences a breakthrough? I don't know if it happens that way, because you said
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of the things that you have learned sort of happen slowly and you kind of had
Yeah.
to figure it out along the way. But does it ever happen when someone goes, oh my gosh, I need to really do that? And that's what I'm going to do right now. Does that happen,
Yeah.
or is it
Oh,
that's
for
not
sure.
really a thing?
No,
Yeah.
there are people that do. Yeah, there are people that are just ready,
Yes.
that are just, like, we won't get into the weeds with my story, but I had done meth for 9 years in my 20s. Now I was a professional salesperson, so I'm not the person you typically think of when you think meth head, right? You probably
Mm-hmm.
instantly thought of, some guy with all tattoos and black teeth and all that stuff,
Breaking
right?
Bad.
Right,
That's what I
exactly. Yeah,
think of.
yeah, great. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But there came a morning where literally I woke up and I had just done it the night before. It was the last time I ever did it. And that was 27 years ago. I was done. I was sick and tired of feeling the way I felt. It wasn't fun anymore. And I like to call these courageous decisions. I just made a courageous decision that I'm done. I don't want to, this is not who I want to be. And it was over with. So I've experienced that myself. But I want to share one with you that I thought was so cool, because this one didn't come like day one, but it came pretty rapidly. I was working with one of my clients. She's actually getting ready to send me this background testimony so I can share it. And so she was going through a very, very long, difficult marriage with a husband who had a lot of mental illness. There was a lot of abuse, just decades of just painful experiences.
Mm.
And so eventually they ended up separating. And so during this time of separation, that's when she really wanted to make some changes. And then why she started working with me. She's like, I want to start doing some new things. I want to live my life. Now, what she didn't know what was going to happen is she had gained about 45 pounds during this year or two season where, and I'm sure it was just all the stress and the toxins and everything that she was holding on to. But we did some of these things we're talking about here where we had her, write down and decide. And I have some other tools that I use to make this work. And so she began to realize who she really wanted to be, and what would that look like. Well, one of them was to start going on walks. Sounds pretty simple, right? So she started going just on walks. She didn't start eating differently, really. She didn't start going on, she didn't do HIIT routines or any of this kind of stuff. She just started going on walks, but she started telling herself this new story. And Robin, I'll never forget it. In about a 2-3 day period, because I told her, I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go on a 2-day retreat by yourself. Take yourself on a retreat, get away from everything. And then we're going to do some of these exercises where you're going to tell yourself this new story. She lost 20 pounds over the weekend. And it's
Oh my
now been
goodness.
about 4 or 5 months, and she
That's
lost
incredible.
over 45 pounds. But
That's
it's not even
incredible.
just the weight. But that's important, because that
Yeah.
weight was it was more evidence
It was like a
of her living
reminder
out
of
of that
what you
old
went
self.
through.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
yeah,
That's
things can
incredible.
happen very rapidly at times if you're willing to put in the work.
Yeah. Well, oh, and you know what? I'm glad you said if you're willing to put in the work,
Right.
because sometimes when I think of, I believe in meditation, I believe in affirmations, I believe in visualization. I think that's all really good, positive stuff to have
Yeah.
that in your mind. But you can't just like wish and have it magically appear. You
Right.
actually have to like make real changes, or it gets you in the mindset to make the changes. You still have to make the changes. Don't you
That's
agree?
exactly right. Oh, absolutely. I mentioned a little bit ago that I was a pastor for 17 years. So, whether your listener is has a religion of any kind or not, doesn't really matter. For us, we consider ourselves people of faith. Well, faith works the exact same way. It's not faith unless you do something.
Yes, exactly. Right.
You
You
can't
can
just sit
just,
around and go, "Oh, I believe in," and then, but
mhm.
I'm just going to sit on my hands and hope everything works out.
Yes. What you're praying for, what you're asking for, what your visualization is, sort of the strength, the power, the whatever it is inside of you to make those changes, to do what is needed to be done. And sometimes you're also praying, or what, if you want to use the word praying, for
Yeah,
sort of a sign or an answer or something to come to you. But it still generally means that you have to take a step, that there's
right.
some course of action, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Even what you just described is an action.
Yes.
Even if you are, so obviously I'm a person of prayer, so there's been times where I've been praying waiting for some kind of an answer, but the act of that and being specific about the information I'm trying to gain, right, is an
Hmm.
action itself. And then sometimes I get the information that leads me to a yes, sometimes I get what I feel like is that's a no, it shouldn't go in that direction, but either way that's still an action too. So
That's true.
I'm right
That
there
is
with
very
you.
true. I think we always hear a lot about mindfulness and
Mm-hmm,
consciousness,
mm-hmm.
but there is really something to that. I really believe that because I used to work in a job where I was busy, oh gosh, a lot. I was really busy. I mean, talk about I spent time with my kids, but not as much as I would have liked to when they were a little younger. I had a lot going on, I had a lot of responsibility. And I always say I was on a gerbil wheel and I didn't even
Yeah,
know how to get
yeah,
off. I just was
right.
just going, 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 going. I barely had time. I'd go from one appointment to another thing and pick up my kids and then go to the game. And it just
Yep.
seemed like I never had a minute to just kind of chill out and stop and think. And it really makes such a difference. And I've been trying to do something called the miracle morning lately, where I'm
Okay.
getting up a little bit earlier, having that time in the morning, getting my exercise done, thinking about how I want to show up in my day and what I want to do. And
Yeah.
I think it sets your day better. I've never been a morning person, never. It's just not my thing. I'm a night owl. My family, we would be up watching movies till 1 a.m. when I was younger. And I carried that on. And it's really, really hard to break, I have to say. But, it starts with going to bed earlier and just
Yeah.
changing your habits. But I'm trying to make this change in my life, Clint. I'm just
Yeah.
thinking this is a better way to live your life, and take some time to just slow it down. Don't you think so many people are on
Yeah.
that gerbil wheel? And especially when you have young kids, I think that it's really, you almost get caught up in it and you almost
Right.
can't get out of it.
Yeah. Well, I love what you just said because you talked about slowing it down because and there's different methods to doing that,
Sure.
right? Even
Mm-hmm.
a morning routine can look a lot of different ways, depending on the person. But that's ultimately what we're talking about because most people don't, Robin. Far and
Mm-hmm.
away, most people never get off the hamster wheel
Mm-hmm.
because they never slowed down enough. They never quiet their mind long enough to even think about why am I actually so miserable? Why am I still in a job or a career that I absolutely hate? Why is my relationship not what I want it to be? Right? Because they never slow down. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like you said, the
It's almost
constant
just like a
hamster
habit.
wheel.
Get up,
Yeah,
you do it. I know.
absolutely.
It's
And I will
it's so
say,
true.
yeah, and I will say, obviously, this is what I'm about to say. This is the way I would want anybody to have to come to terms with that. But that was one of the side effects, if I could say it that way, of losing Gabriel. When someone, especially with such a hope and a future,
Oh,
and when someone like that passes in your life, man, the thin veil between living and dying, and the fact that we're not guaranteed tomorrow becomes very vivid, and it's in your face very quickly. And so, for us, it can go two directions. I mean, it can, if you allow it, it can drive you into the weeds and into deep depression,
oh,
and you
I
can
could.
stop
You almost
living,
feel like you can't pick your head off a pillow.
Yeah.
Like me.
And there were definitely hours and days where, it was a struggle physically and mentally. I don't want to dismiss that at all.
No,
That
no.
we went through that and still do have times where, you're just hit. There's a trigger somewhere that gets you a certain
Mm-hmm.
way. And, but we've had these other things we've been talking about so far, the life mentality and all that kind of stuff that recalibrates us back to it. But my point is just for us, his death made it so vivid, even though we all know cognitively that Nobody's guaranteed time, right? We all know it,
Yes. Yes.
but it caused us to start looking at everything. So we did. We started, taking the rocks of our life and looking underneath every one of them, and looked at what we were doing for a living. Did we really want to do that? My wife became an artist and loves what she's doing. We looked at the relationships that we had. We looked at the people in our life that maybe we were spending time with that we felt like professionally out of obligation or things like that, that were taking away from us and tearing us down and wearing us out. One of my chapters is called Parasites and Boundaries. It's very short and it's a little blunt, but it's really needed
Yeah.
because you need
No,
to
it
know
is.
who you're surrounding your life with.
It's a shame they teach us so many things in school. And I hate to say this, we're never going to use again. It's just
Right.
unfortunate. It's
Oh,
just the
it's
way
true.
it is.
Yeah, it's totally true.
Why are they not teaching kids about this,
Yeah.
about, stopping and taking a look at your life and making, setting goals and making choices that, instead of getting stuck in that wheel. I mean, it happens to so many people.
Yeah.
You get out of school, you get a job, you get married, you have kids. It's almost like it's just you plug yourself into this life, and that's just the life you're gonna. And some people love it. They make good choices. They happen to
Yeah.
have a job they love and a family they love, and it's all good. But some people don't, and they're
Yeah.
stuck, and they're stuck in this situation, and they can't seem to break through it. And I just think it's such a sad way to live your life. I tell my kids all the time, don't be a cork bobbing on the ocean. I always tell them that. It's just a phrase that I use,
Yeah.
just like, don't just flutter with the wind. Have a direction, have a goal, have a mindset. Think about what you want to do and live that way. Like you say,
Yeah.
big, bold, and brave.
Absolutely.
Just live that
Absolutely.
way and go for the things that you want to go for. Don't just let life dictate to you.
That's exactly right. And only you can make that choice at the end of the day. I actually called myself a coward in the book because there were components of my life after looking at the way my son Gabriel lived that I let fear. Writing a book was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I had known that I was supposed to write a book years ago, decades ago, and I had to get over a fear because a lot of
Yeah.
times that's really what keeps us back. We're just, even though we're stuck in the mundane, we hate the hamster wheel, but it's scary off the hamster wheel. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'll just stay on it, and
Because
eventually
you know it.
make it.
Because you know
Yeah,
it. It's
exactly
familiar.
right.
Yes.
So, you got to be willing to make that really courageous decision and say, you know what? Nobody else is going to chase my dream for me. No
Yes.
one else is going to change my life. It's truly in my lap. And what am I going to do about it?
I love that. I love that with like all personal responsibility, because I know, so many people I've always been in working out and fitness, and I've had my
Yeah.
ups and downs with my weight and times that I didn't feel like doing it. I mean, of course, like everybody else. But I always think to myself, no one's forcing you to eat that. No one's
That's right.
forcing you to
That's
drink
right.
that. There's not some magical, genie coming down and stuffing your face with something. You
Yeah.
choose it. It's your choice. And sometimes it's almost seems like, I don't know. Sometimes it seems as if people almost like don't realize that they kind of get stuck in their habits and their
Right.
ways, and they don't seem like they have a choice. And we always have a choice.
Yeah, we do. We do. It's again, it goes back to the story you tell yourself. And it's so important. And so there are people just like you described, that maybe you're raised a certain way. My wife is Puerto Rican, so
Mm-hmm.
there's a culture with that. So she has
Mm-hmm.
family members that act in certain ways because, well, that's just our culture. And same thing, with my family and my culture. My parents were not risk takers at all.
Yes.
Hard workers, a lot of very admirable qualities, but they missed out. And these are all things they told me as they got older. They missed out on some amazing financial opportunities because they were just too afraid to take any risks. And
Mm-hmm.
so, that's it's up to you. There's no one else.
Yes. Yes,
It's
that's
like
right.
boundaries. We talk about relational boundaries. They're very important, but no one else is going to put them in place for you. It
Yes.
has to start with you.
I just love that. I love it. And I love that you wrote this book and that you are finding a way to somehow, I know you can't say the word overcome, but live
Right.
with this tragedy in your life and share what you've learned with others, because I think it's so valuable for people, especially from someone who has gone through it. Where
Yeah.
can people get the book? Where can they
Thank
learn
you.
more about your mission to help them?
Yes. Well, what I'd love for them to do is go to the website, which is bigboldbrave.us. And for those sticklers, yes, I know it's US, but I believe in collaboration. I believe we don't do anything great on this planet without others. So I intentionally picked that domain. So it's bigboldbrave.us. And there they can sign up for a newsletter that I'm actually going to be starting next week that I'm really excited about, that will include some free content and just some fun stuff. And then there they can purchase the book. Now, we know we may have some international listeners as well. And so there's a link. You can go get the book on Amazon as well. Especially if you live internationally, you'll want to get the book through there because shipping on this planet is now completely crazy. So,
Yes,
but domestically, you can buy the book. You can find out about how you can invite me to speak at your organization, conference, whatever, all that stuff. Kind of one-stop shopping.
And podcast coming soon.
Podcast
right?
coming soon. Yeah, I'm
Big,
working with the
bold,
team
brave.
right now to kind of build a budget around that, and it's going to be stories of big, bold, brave humans. So really, I just want to share a bunch of stories of inspiring people that have overcome all kinds of adversity, and not just that, but in doing so, they've decided to serve people and help others.
I love that. And this was such a great conversation. I just really enjoyed speaking with you, Clint. It's been so enlightening for me, and you have such a good heart, and you really are doing good things for people. So thank you so much for spending your time with me today.
Well, thank you, Robin. I feel the same way. You have a beautiful smile, and your energy is just
Thank
wonderful, and
you.
it jumps through the screen. So it was my
Oh,
pleasure.
well, thank you. Thank you so much, Clint Hatton. And thank you for being with me today for Living Well with Robin Stoloff, empowering you to live a healthier life. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll keep you updated on my most recent episode. Until I see you next time, keep living well.